Okay, this video is how living in Chile tweaked my mind. I'm doing this video because Krishna's Little Helper asked me to do this video. I do videos by request, by the way, and if anybody ever requested me to do a video and I never did it, it's because I forgot. So you just have to remind me. It's not because I don't want to do it, it's just because I simply forgot. Silly me. Whoopsie. Adam Baskey, you're so weird. But you are sexy. I've seen your pictures. A basket of apples gave them to me, and I play with myself every time I see you. You're the only man that I play myself with, looking at pictures of. I like that little tuft of hair you have between your nipples. Anyways. What was this video about? Oh yeah, living in Chile. How living in Chile like tweaked my mind. Yeah, I mentioned it in one of my videos. I can't remember which one. Oh yeah, living in Chile tweaked my mind. So he's like, oh yeah, do a video about that basket of apples. No, not basket of apples. Christian's Little Helper. I think Christian's Little Helper and basket of apples actually know each other. Maybe Christian's Little Helper is Adam Baskey. Whatever. So yeah, how living in Chile tweaked my mind. Living in Chile tweaked my mind because, and there is a moral to the story. I don't just want to talk trash about a certain kind of person, but the moral of the story is that we have got to allow poor people to have dignity, and we need to close the gap between the rich and the poor, money-wise, and that fixing problems in society are the responsibility of everybody. Because the main thing about Chile, with me, and how it tweaked my mind is that there's this huge chasm, this huge difference between the rich and the poor. And I lived there for 5 years, and like I learned stuff living in there on a soul level, like a deep emotional level, that I wouldn't have learned if I was only there 4 years. I learned stuff there 5 years that I didn't know in 4 years, and of course I learned stuff 4 years that I didn't know 3 years, and you learn stuff if you stay in a place for 6 months that you wouldn't know when you first go there. But 5 years is a long time. I was married to a girl, sweet little girl, lived with her and her family, and she was poor. They were the poor people. So I was familiar with the poor people. But I was also familiar with the rich people because I was an English teacher and I gave English classes to a lot of rich people. And so I saw the poor people and I saw the rich people. And Chile is very weird because the poor people are different from the rich people. And it's kind of like, and, you know, Chile is kind of like the past. It's like going into the past. I just finished watching 3 seasons of The Tudors, which is about King Henry VIII. And those people, it was kind of like I was back in Chile. The way that they act, it's similar to Chile. Going to Chile is kind of like going back in time. Because they act like they did back in time, and they have all the whole classism like they did back in time. Now when I say how living in Chile tweaked my mind, is that it really did kind of tweak my mind in a way that it freaked me out a little bit after like 4.5 years, or after like until maybe like a month or two before I left. You know how you get last day of school syndrome, and you get the plane ticket and you see that you're going to go home, and then next thing you know you just have to go home, and then it kind of like you relive your life there, and then you're like, you have to go home. And that's kind of, I felt like I was in a pressure cooker the last 3 weeks before I left. And I just kind of had these feelings that I didn't have after 4 years. And some of the feelings that I had was like, I started getting really like cynical, like not liking Chileans. I'd call them raisin heads, not to them, but that was like my pet name for Chileans, raisin heads, because out of the periphery of my eye, when I would see their heads, I would see raisins for heads. Like I'd see their bodies are normal size, but I would see a tiny little head. And I think I was seeing like their aura out of the periphery of my mind. And like Chileans have, big hearts, and the aura in their heart is chakra, and their heart is strong, but their head is shriveled. They're the raisin heads because their brains weren't turned on. These were the poor Chileans. I don't know. I don't think I looked at, well, the rich Chileans too, but in a different way. Yeah, they didn't use their heads. I also called them dirt bags. Not as a derogatory word, but as an actual literal, perfectly descriptive way of what they are. And a dirt bag is this this unit of beautiful potentiality. Dirt. You can grow anything in dirt. We live off dirt. We grow our fruits and vegetables off dirt. Dirt is great, but when it's in a bag, it's not growing anything. It's not taking in any sun or water or nutrients. It's just kind of dormant. And the longer you leave it like that, it'll eventually, grow a whole bunch of, it'll lose all of its moisture and turn into a rock, and you can't use it for anything, or it'll grow some kind of fungus and become rotten, and then you won't use it for dirt that way. So the dirt is like potentiality that needs to be cut open and released to the rest of the world. And that's kind of how I looked at Chileans as well, like dirt bags, like. And I just having closed minds. It was like I think it's related to the Catholic Church. Chileans are difficult to talk to, but one really interesting weird thing about Chileans is that there's different kinds of Chileans, and the rich are different from the poor. Like, and I think they take up the extremes of every single personality. Like you could choose an extreme of anything, and then say that's what a Chilean is. You could say they're the coldest, rudest people in the world, and yeah, there's Chileans there who just scowl at you on the street and are just like do stuff that are like that's not nice. Like I remember I went on this backpacking trip for like 3 weeks in the mountains, and I was coming home, and I was in the subway, and I was tired because I'd been hiking all day, and I leaned up against the central pole, and I guess I was slouching a little bit on it, but I wanted to like stand up again. But by then there was this guy who had put his hand on the pole, and he was holding it tight, and I couldn't bring my shoulder up, so I had to like stay hunched. But there was nothing above the guy's hand. He had his hand down low, and I was like kind of pushing up a little bit, and I looked at him, and I was like pushing my shoulder up against, and he was like scowled at me like, I will never let go. This is where I have my hand. And it was weird, dude. Like there was no reason for him to move his hand a couple inches higher. It wouldn't have been any harder for him to do that. And it was just that kind of thing, like doing shit that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, I don't know where that came from, but well, yeah, that was the example how they can be like the coldest people in the world. Well, you could also say that they're the warmest people in the world, and the most generous. You could say, oh, they're like the least generous because they're always ripping you off, and I've got tons of stories about that. Oh my God, I heard stories that, like I rented a apartment or an office. My wife wanted me to rent an office for her like little massage business with her friend, and we rented an apartment from this guy, but then it turned out that he wasn't the real owner of the apartment. He was subleasing it from the real owner, who thought that but he never paid the guy money, and he'd been renting it for 3 years and never paid the guy a penny, but had been collecting money from all of these renters in that, like, a office building. And like, but it's like, who do you believe? It's like, why don't you just come and tell the people who are renting the office then? And so, you know, there's like, they're just lying and cheating each other. And of course me, like, I had trouble getting paid for some people, like give a class and then they don't even pay for the class. And then be like, oh, I'll pay later, I forgot, and, you know, and then they never pay. Or like underpaying you, that they do that too. You give them the bill and then they pay you less than the classes that they had, or a lot less. And just because they like, they think they can get away with it or something. Yeah, stuff like that. And those are the rich people actually that do that more than the poor people. Poor people are, I've never had a problem getting paid. But you could say that they're the most generous people in the world. Like buying movies on the street. Sometimes the guy will just give you an extra movie just because after you paid him and you got all the movies, you'd be like, hey, here's another one. Like, neither of that stuff in those two extremes I would see in America. Like in America, you give the guy the money for the movie and he gives you what you paid for. But, you know, in America, if you charge somebody for a class, they'll pay you for what they got. And then like